Haha, you clicked on the video. I win. I'm just kidding. I haven't won yet. If you're new to my channel, then welcome. And if you're not new, then welcome back. Now, I'm just gonna assume you clicked on the video for the reason I think you did, which is you're looking for a new game and you just happen to come across this. Or you're an already existing fan that wants to see someone talk about their favorite game. But to all of the above, I hope you find it entertaining. But I guess it's time to do some boring intro stuff. Tower of Adventures is a new game, a part of the Cookie Run series. It's released and developed by Devsisters, who also released the previous Cookie Run games, obviously. But what makes Tower of Adventures stand out against its predecessors is that it's the very first 3D rendition of the beloved franchise. They somehow managed to keep the cuteness and uniqueness of the cookies with the transition over, which is impressive, unlike another really popular franchise. But outside of the 3D art style, the game markets itself as a hack and slash action RPG. A hack and slash is a game whose combat has an emphasis on melee weapons, but ranged weapons do exist in them. Another trait is that they're typically top down, much like Tower of Adventures. As for the action RPG part, it's simply an RPG where the player has direct control over the character during combat, which again is clearly true for Tower of Adventures. Now, I could sit here all day talking about game genres and stuff, but that's boring, so I'm not going to do that. By the way, there will be timestamps below, so if you want to skip to a specific part of the video, feel free to. But let's get on to... First off, if you haven't picked up on it already, every single playable character is a cookie. And I mean all of them. Whether or not the type of cookie they are is actually edible doesn't really matter, as Devsisters is incredibly creative with what they can turn into a cookie. Do you want an anime schoolgirl themed after cream soda? Boom. Or maybe you just want a divine entity. How about a lightning archer themed after lemon zest? Or maybe a cowgirl cookie themed after rye is more your style. I mean, you get the point. Choosing cookies as their character medium is actually a really smart choice, as they're able to do things they can't normally do with like human characters, setting them apart from other gacha games. While these were more normal choices, I don't think anyone would ever think of this fruit becoming a character in a game. But hey, here we are. There's pretty much something for everyone, as there's cutesy cookies, cool cookies, edgy cookies. There's pretty much, like I said, something for everyone. And even if there isn't something that really sticks out to you at this moment, they're constantly adding more. So if you want a game that has unique character designs that you aren't going to find anywhere else, then, you know, this is your game. But let's move on to the next topic. I'm putting this right after the characters because it doesn't matter if there's cool characters if the gameplay sucks, which I'm gonna say it doesn't. But before we talk about the gameplay itself, I want to talk about how the characters are divided, because they are very important to the gameplay. Obviously. But you know what I mean. But starting off, every character is assigned to an element. Those elements being one of the 6: water, fire, wind, earth, light, and darkness. Outside of them being there for thematic purposes, they're also used for elemental advantages during some game modes, and for another mechanic, which I will touch on in a little bit. Next up is a character's attack type. This is simply how a character attacks. They are split into 5 types: smash, slash, magic, ranged, and assist. Outside of, again, thematic purposes, they're used for the way a cookie physically attacks and the way their kit works, and they're also used for the weapon system, which again I will touch on in a little bit. And finally, we have the cookie's roles, those being split into 3. You have your fighters, which are your main DPS, you have your taggers, which are your sub DPS, and you have your supports, which are your supports. The first and last roles are pretty self-explanatory, with your fighters being your main damage dealers. They want to do as much damage as possible, and your supports being your healers and shielders. But taggers, while being sub DPS, mess with a new mechanic, that being the elemental tag, hence the name. An elemental tag is put on an enemy whenever a tagger uses an ability, and it does damage when detonated. It's pretty simple. There is more behind it, but I am not going to go into it here. And now it's time to get on to the actual gameplay. At its core, the gameplay is very, very simple, having the vibe of your run-of-the-mill mobile game, but in a good way. It's very simple, but because of the characters, it adds complexity. You don't need to be smart to play the game, but if you are smart, you can definitely get more out of it, which in my opinion is how a good game should be. It appeals to a pretty wide audience because of this, at least relatively speaking. Now, every cookie actually has 5 parts to their kit. First part is their passive. As the name implies, it's something that they just naturally have. For some characters, this shapes their entire kit, like lemon zest. But for For others, it's simply just an addition. The second part is their basic attack, which is a simple just attack. It doesn't actually have a cooldown and you can just spam it. Then there's also your special skill, which does have a cooldown, but it's typically not a super duper long one. Every cookie also has a dash, which is just a simple dash forward. This does have a cooldown, and certain cookies like Wizard Cookie actually have a unique animation where instead of dashing, he teleports. And the final part of their kit is their ultimate, which has a long cooldown, but it's typically really powerful. As you can see, for Gingerbrave, he does a mega dash forward and slams down. And for a character like Twisted Donut, where he places normal turrets, his ultimate summons a big turret. While on the surface, it doesn't seem that interesting, if you've been watching the gameplay in the background, you can probably see that there's a lot going on in the screen. And that's because, like I said earlier, even though it's simple on the surface, it does allow for skill expression. And there is a right and wrong way to play some characters. And the concept of rotations exists just like in Genshin. But I know that character gameplay isn't all that people care about. Not all basic enemies are just bullet sponges, and some do have mechanics that you need to play around. The various levels in the game are actually pretty fun and unique, each having their own challenges you have to go through. And bosses do have their own mechanics and aren't just bullet sponges like other games, and they legitimately have things that you can do to interact with them besides just standing there and hitting them. I'll actually show you one of my favorite levels in my favorite chapter. Now, chapter 8 is actually the newest chapter in the game currently, and is widely agreed upon being the best, as it introduces some fun new enemies and a lot of really cool puzzles. You can actually see one of the new enemies on screen, which are these little angel things that will throw cubes at you. Now, if you get hit by a cube, you get stunned, and it's not for a short time either. Meaning in a timed game mode like the Infinite Labyrinth, which I will touch on later, this can ruin a run. But on screen right now, you can actually see the reason why I like the chapter so much. With this chapter, they introduce these little light things that you can interact with, making for some pretty fun puzzles. What you have to do is you have to wait for the rotating sides to be exposed to each other, so that way if you shoot the blue light, it can go through the first pink one into the next, and then all the way to the end. And the lights aren't just used for puzzles, as they're also used as obstacles for the level, as well as other various floaty, spiky cubes. And they're just as annoying. And for this level specifically, the lights are used to uncover a little secret area, which has something called a bear jelly. Now, every level has these bear jellies, and by collecting them, you can actually exchange them for various rewards. Every chapter is assigned a biome, and every biome has their own unique bear jelly. So, for example, Chapter 8 has the citrus bear jellies, and I don't have all the rewards because the second chapter for the biome isn't out yet, but this is how they incentivize you to explore the various levels. I don't want to get into the various levels and like the different puzzles they have because that would be spoiling it for you and that's not fun. So overall, I think the game does a pretty good job with the gameplay, at least for what it is. It's not meant to be some super duper complex game that has a lot of skill required, but it's really just fun and chill to play, with some hard levels here and there. The enemies are fun, the levels are fun, the bosses are actually like surprisingly fun, but I think it's time to go on to our next category. Now, the game actually has quite a few game modes. You have Story Mode, Raid Mode, Glass Labyrinth, Seasoning Dungeons, Tower Rift, and then Champions Raids, which aren't out yet but will be coming soon. Now, I already showed you what Story Mode can offer, but it has both a single player and multiplayer mode, meaning you can play this with your friends. Raid Mode is this game's really replayable mode. After you've done everything else in the game, this is what you'll find yourself doing a lot of the time, as it's one of the core modes for progression, but it's not a strictly endgame mode, and you can do it since you unlock it. Now, the game mode is as it implies, it is a boss raid mode. It is strictly multiplayer, which is both good and bad, because like other games, League of Legends, teammates can really make the difference. But what's nice about it is the developers actually take a lot of feedback from this mode, as if it's too hard, they'll make it easier. If it's too easy, if it's too easy, they probably won't make it harder. And if the mode just feels bad to play, they will try their best to fix it. They've done this once by adding pity to higher level equipment, which you can earn by playing the mode. And I remember, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the boss was really hard and they just toned it down entirely because it was just not fun to play. play. Plus, we love a developer that actually listens to their player base. Now, you might be wondering how they can keep this mode fresh every week. Well, that's because there's 3 things that change weekly. Well, 2 things that change weekly and 1 thing that changes monthly. First of all, the boss changes every single week. Second of all, the recommended elements also change every week. Now, these elements aren't just recommended, they're the elements that actually do increase damage to the boss, meaning they actually keep the meta fresh and new every single week. And finally, the season rule changes every single month. And the first month, it was tornadoes that were really annoying and they would knock you back, and now it's a cookie link, which means if you go too far away from someone you're linked to during the raid, you start taking damage, meaning you actually have to be coordinated with your teammates on where you want to move so you don't die. I also forgot to mention that the raid has 5 tiers, with tier 4 and above having the season rule, and with tier 5 actually having an enhanced season rule. The power requirement increases with every stage, so that way you aren't going to be super duper weak going into the raid. Overall, I find the game mode really enjoyable, and the boss variety makes it super fun. And it's actually the mode that gets my friends interested, because whenever I'm playing it and I'm sharing my screen, they see this and like, wow, that looks cool, that looks fun. So, you know, maybe it'll have that effect on you. I'm kidding. Now, the next game mode I want to talk about is the Glass Labyrinth. This is this game's version of the Spiral Abyss. It first starts off as the Labyrinth of Remembrance, which is just 10 different stages that you can just complete. It's a one-time thing and you get pretty decent rewards for doing it. But then once you complete that, you unlock the Infinite Labyrinth, which has 3 stages, compiled of 3 stages, that you clear for points. And it has a leaderboard for different ranks. As you can see, I'm in Diamond, top 15%, and in the bottom right, you can see my obtainable rewards. This is what a lot of the footage in the background is. The mode is fun and is a nice challenge, and in order to clear it in fast times, you do have to plan your runs. Next up, we have the Seasoning Dungeons. This is probably the worst mode in the game, but it's how you get your core resources for your cookies. The Hexagon Bee Forest is how you get stuff to level up your cookies. All that it is you pretty much need to destroy the beehive within the time limit while waves of bees spawn and while honey jars spawn to heal the beehive. Next up is Hagster Hideout, which is how you get your coins. All that it is little gremlin things spawn in waves, and you need to kill as many as you can as fast as possible to rack up enough points. This is probably the most tedious of the modes to do. The final of the modes is the Ascensionite Mine, which is how you get the resource used to ascend cookies. The mode is pretty much that there's a drill that you need to defend, waves of monsters will try and attack it, but you need to kill them. Very, very simple. There's also a different mine for every single element, so it does feel a little tedious at times. And finally, we have the Tower Rift, which can be played alone or with a friend, and is used to get stuff to level up equipment. In order to play it, you need to get these Tower Rift tickets, and you get 2 of these daily. The gameplay is very simple. There's 4 stages you have to clear through, and after you clear through the final stage, you have to fight a final wave of enemies. It's not that hard of a mode, and it's honestly more tedious if anything. Overall, all the different modes provide a nice variety of gameplay, and while some are tedious and some actually serve a gameplay purpose, the variety is nice nonetheless. But we have 2 more topics left, so let's move on to the next one. Honestly, the story is eh. It's not bad, but it's also nothing to write home about. Without spoiling anything, the gist is, Gingerbrave escapes the witch's oven, and he comes across a sugar star, and the star leads him to a book that reads a fairy tale, and it's just the Gingerbrave is the hero that's gonna save everyone. It doesn't really get interesting until around chapter 8, aka the newest chapter, but it's not a super, like, confusing story, and it's pretty cute. But to be fair, this is pretty standard for Cookie Ring games, as Cookie Ring Kingdom is the exact same way. It was boring at the start, but now it's really interesting. Time to move on to the final topic. I believe this is where the game frustrates the most people, as the progression system is very, very grindy. I'm not going to go too into it because I could honestly make a whole separate video about why I dislike the progression system, but in reality, it's really not that bad. The thing is that it's super duper grindy and time gated. It takes time to get resources, it takes time and luck to get the gear, it takes time and luck to roll for substats, it takes time and luck to get the stuff to actually roll for the substats. It's obviously luck to get copies of the character and copies of the game's artifact. It's just really luck-based and really time-based. But the power is actually noticeable. And luckily, there is content in the game that is hard enough to actually want you to push your cookie's power level to its maximum, as both Raid Mode and Infinite Labyrinth have leaderboards. So at the very least, there is goals to achieve with these strong cookies. And it's definitely satisfying and keeps you coming back for more. So while it is frustrating and there are a lot of things that they should fix within the progression system, it's not the worst. Because at the very least, when you have a built cookie, you can actually do stuff with it. Unlike Genshin Impact. Yeah, I said it.
need to leave.
What? I'm allowed to have my own thoughts, okay? Jeez. I would actually say the game is pretty free to play. A lot of people are complaining saying, there's not enough gems, there's not enough gems. Well, buddy, have you ever played a gacha game before? Because that's how it is. They've been giving out a lot of like free gems since the start of the game. And if you just save, you can easily rack up 50, 60, 70 pulls just by showing some restraint. Not to mention they have events where you can unlock free stuff. So there's that. The probabilities also aren't that bad, with every pull having a 17% chance to be an epic, which is pretty good. So overall, I would say the game is free to play friendly, despite what some people think. And that's it. I know I didn't do a whole lot of convincing as this was more just a showcase of the game, but to be honest, I think the game is pretty good by itself. And I'm not going to sit and be like, wow, this is the best game ever. I love it. Because the game is just fun. And it really shouldn't matter how quote unquote good the game is. It should matter how much you enjoy playing it. And because the game is free, I would say try it either way, because I don't know, you might actually really like it even if it seems like you don't. But if you enjoyed, a like and a subscribe would be very appreciated, because this video took a lot of time and doing that would only take like a second. Also follow me on Twitch and join my Discord server in the description below. And I might never see you again, or I might. So until next time, or never. Also, I win.